look at the next verse. It says, so the two of them continued on their journey. When they came to Bethlehem, the entire town was excited by their arrival. Is it really Naomi? The women asked. And so everybody's excited that she's coming back. Now watch this, verse 20. Don't call me Naomi, she responded. Instead, call me Mara, for the Almighty has made life very bitter for me. Mara means bitter. That's what it means. And what she did is she took on the name of her problems, bitterness, right? She took that name on, and she allowed her situation to identify her. She allowed her distress to define her destiny. And this is so important. And we're going to come back and we're going to see it in a moment. But just to prove the point that blame is putting somebody else's name on your pain, you see it in this story, right? Look at verse 21. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me home empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has caused me to suffer and the Almighty has sent such tragedy upon me? That last verse sums up Naomi's entire attitude at this point in her life. She lived 10 long years in a foreign land, the whole time feeling like an outcast. And now she is coming home and she still feels like an outcast. And she is so overwhelmed that she begins to play the blame game. She could blame her husband for dragging her and her family off to Moab. She can blame her son-in-laws, or sons, or her daughters-in-law. She could blame the other Moabites, but ultimately what she does is she starts to blame God. That's what she's doing. Why call me Naomi? But the Lord has brought me home. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has caused me to suffer. The Almighty has sent this into my life. This is moment after moment and opportunity after opportunity for Naomi to lay the blame on someone else. And by the time you get to the end of chapter 1, she's given up hope. And 10 years has gone by. A full decade has gone by. And what was supposed to be temporary has turned into one nightmare after another. And who can blame her, by the way, for beginning to play the blame game? Nobody could blame her. But what happens when you play the blame game, when you put somebody else's name on your pain, it corrodes your trust in God. It corrodes your trust in God, ultimately. That's what playing the blame game does. Now watch this. She had two sons, Mahlon and Chilion. And those two names mean nothing to you, right? And they mean nothing to me. But when you understand the Old Testament, you understand the Hebrew, and you understand the language of the Hebrew, and that's why the Old Testament is so awesome in so many places and so many points, is because each of the names mean something, and their names are very, very, very important. Mahlon means sick. And Chilion means weak. And they were sick and getting sicker, and they were weak and getting weaker. Now, the tragedy, listen, Naomi felt tragedy following tragedy following tragedy. And in that situation, she put blame on her, or name on her pain, and put that name on her kids. Can you imagine being so upset about what you're going through in life, what the circumstances are in life, that you name your kids after those circumstances? We can't imagine that, right? You would never walk into a conversation and go, hey man, your kids are so great. What are their names? Well, I want you to meet root canal and diabetes. my children, right? You would never do that. Have you met my family? This is laid off in foreclosure. We would never do that with our children, right? We would never do that. This is my son counseling and my daughter ADD, HD, right? I mean, we would never put our name on the children. And here's what I want to say to you today. Don't do that in any other area of your life either. Listen, don't let your pain define you. Your pain cannot define you. When you allow it to begin to define you, you're playing into the enemy's end game. She let famine and she let her circumstances get to her so much that they named their kids after their circumstances, and they named their children after the mess. Do you see the pattern? The pattern that's playing out is this pattern that is the wrong pattern, and you've gotten into the wrong pattern, and when you let the wrong pattern be what drives you, you're in big, big trouble. Do not let your mess be your message. It is more than that. You can have a message from your mess, but do not let your mess drive you. Do not let what happened to you be you, right? And on a regular basis. And in fact, I try to teach my kids all the time. One of them made a mistake in a soccer game this last week, and he's hitting his head and with his hand, and he's thinking through it. And I said, hey, man, you messed up. That doesn't mean you are a mess up, right? Every athlete messes up. It does not define you. It does not mean you are a mess up, right? In fact, most of the time you do it right. Most of the times you succeed at it. And so do not let that define you. What if God named us after our weaknesses? And what if God named us after our messes and our tragedy? He doesn't do that. He has a name picked for you. And He has written it down in the book of life. And He looks at your name day and night because He loves you. In fact, He engraved it in His palm. Don't play the blame game because God has a better name for you. Naomi. You know what Naomi means? It means pleasant. That's what that name means. It's such a great name, right? But when Naomi came home, when Pleasant came home, they said, hey, Naomi, it's so good to see you. And she replied, don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara. Call me suffering and call me bitterness. To which we would all go, wow, what's up with you? That's what happens, by the way. When you get in that pattern of blame, you are repulsive to the people around you. And it's part of the enemy's tactics to get you off by yourself because people begin to abandon you. And all of a sudden, you're like the herd, the part of the herd, the baby one of the herd that got out all by themselves so that the lion can come and get you. Listen, God has a destiny for you. He has an identity for you that is greater than your circumstance. It is greater than your circumstance. He has a future for you that is better than your past and is even better than your present. And it takes spiritual eyes to see it and a transformed mind to understand it.